Information for sure.
Absolutely.
Ready, Madam Chair?
Are you ready?
I am ready. Let me start.
You're ready, I'm ready.
You ready, Clyde?
Ready. Ready once, ready twice, I'm ready. Good evening, I'm Providence Councilwoman Joanne Ryan. This is the special commission for the study of Providence's waste management services. Wednesday, August 7, 2024. It is 5:30 p.m. Madam Clerk, would you kindly read the roll?
Chairwoman Joanne Ryan,
Present.
Vice Chairman Pedro Espinal,
Present.
Courtney Hawkins,
Present.
Shamari Husband,
Present.
Patricia Coyne Fade is absent, Sheila Doherty,
Present.
and Samantha Burnett.
Present.
And we have 6 present, 1 absent, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Let the record reflect, we are joined by Solicitor Nelson. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope that your son was successful in his baseball activities. Oh, okay. You were all rooting for him. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Also let the record reflect that Councilman Oscar Vargas has joined us this evening. Okay, with that, Madam Clerk, which I ask that you read item 1 into the record, please.
Item number 1, waste reduction strategies, broad discussion regarding waste reduction strategies, composting, diversion, single stream recycling, and other associated topics. The following have been invited for presentation and testimony: Sheila Doherty, Chief of Policy and Resilience. Presentation by City of Providence Sustainability Department on city recycling and compost programs. Priscilla Dela Cruz, Director of Sustainability. Also gonna have a presentation on bottle deposit programs and other waste reduction and diversion best practices. And that's to be by Kevin Boothridge, Deputy Director of Just Zero. Gonna have a presentation on composting and food waste diversion strategies that will be presented by Leo Pollock, previous organics. And a presentation on school food waste diversion initiatives, and I will be presented by Jim Horn, Rhode Island School Recycling Project.
Awesome. Okay, before we start, I'd like to just get all of the exhibits into the record. So work with me here on the first exhibits I'd like to call 5A, 5B, and 5C. They are the amendments that Director Coyne-Fade had said she would provide to us. Amendments to the agreement. So the agreement, the cash flowing agreement is item 5, which is why I want to call them 5A, B, and C. So may I have a motion to do so?
So moved.
Motion made by Vice Chair Espinal, seconded by Commissioner Burnett. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. We have exhibits 5, A, B, and C. Okay, then we are going to call the next exhibit. There's a multi-page PDF. It's not numbered. Oh, yeah, it is. I love when they number the pages. 77 page PowerPoint presentation, entitled Improving Residential Recycling Compliance and Usage, Providence, Rhode Island, final presentation. I'm going to call it's the Harvard study that we spoke about at our last meetings. We've referenced this a couple of times. I asked that it be provided to be entered into the record. So we're going to call that Exhibit 7. Motion made by Vice Chair Espinal, seconded by Commissioner Doherty. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. So we have Exhibit 7. Then we have a PowerPoint presentation, multi-page document entitled Waste Diversion Initiatives, City of Providence Special Commission on the Study of Providence Waste Management Services, by Priscilla Dela Cruz, Director of Sustainability, August 7, 2024. I'd like a motion to call this Exhibit 8.
So moved.
Made by Vice Chair Espinal, seconded by Commissioner Doherty. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. We have 8. Okey dokey, next one, multi-page PowerPoint presentation entitled Bottle Bills. It's this one here, folks. Bottle bills and waste reduction. You got that, Tina?
I do.
Special Commission for the Study of Providence Waste Management Service, Kevin Boudris, Deputy Director, just 0. I'd like to call this 9. Motion made
So
by
moved.
Vice Chair, Espinal, seconded by Commissioner Dormady, all in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. We have exhibit 9. Okey-dokey. Next one. We have a multi-page PowerPoint presentation on titled City of Providence Special Commission for the Study of Providence Waste Management dated August 7. Leo Pollock, co-founder and managing partner of Remix Organics. I'd like to call this exhibit 10. That motion is
So
made by Vice Chair Espinal, seconded by Commissioner Doherty. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. We have 10. And our last one is a multi-page PowerPoint presentation. It also has a couple of brochures, one in English and one in Spanish attached to it. It's entitled Get Clean Smart Rhode Island, Reduce, Reuse, Recycle, Rhode Island Schools Recycling Project. And I would like to entertain a motion to call this exhibit 11.
So moved.
Motion made by Councilman Vice Chair Espinal, seconded by Commissioner Dormady. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. We have 11. Okey dokey, we've got a lot on the docket tonight. So, I wanted just before we start on our presentations, we had an open question at our last meeting about whether or not 6 units and above had to employ a private trash hauling contractor. And there was discussion. I was confused. I asked for clarification. Miguel, do you want to stand, please, from the policy office? Miguel Youngs was able to get some clarity on that topic. I just want to make it part of the testimony. Yeah, you're getting sworn in. Let's right behind the table so we can see you.
Raise your right hand.
Yeah.
Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name and title for the record.
Miguel Youngs, Deputy Director of Policy for the Province.
Okay, question on the table.
Yeah, so
6 units or more?
right, so what I found was that every 7 units or more requires private waste disposal. I reached out to Director Point Bay, that was her response to me, and that is listed on the city website and an FAQ page. And I couldn't find it explicitly stated in the contract or anywhere in the court ordinances, although I did find it in the RFP, which was shared actually in the first meeting, which I was not here for, and circled back to we found it listed in there. So that was the only place I could find that explicitly written. 7 or more. So if you have a property with 6 units, then waste management will get your wastewater.
Okay, so there's also language in the contract that references commercial property.
There is,
Okay.
so, in terms of property that's not covered or ineligible by the, under the waste management contract, I found language that said any commercial enterprise, which I found personally kind of vague. I'm not a lawyer. But
Okay, that's okay.
given the sort of way the city has to classify commercial properties as 6 or more, I had an open question of whether or not that would apply to a property with 6 or more.
So I just think it's a question to look at. I asked last time how many 6 units we have. And I know when we tax, 6 or more is considered commercial. So should it be consistent? Should that number comport with the taxation? We don't know, but I think that we should quantify that. So could I ask, Chief Hawkins, if you could chase that down and help us just get some clarity on that? You know, we're looking for ways to address our trash obligation. That may have value, I'm not sure, it may not be a lot. Or there may be a reason why 7 was the number that was selected. Okay, with that, everybody's name and topic has already been read into the record, so at this point, I would like to ask that everybody who's presenting stand. You can stay exactly where you are, and we're gonna have everybody sworn in that is making the presentation this evening. Wow.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, at the time you come up to present, please state your name, and your titles for the record when you come up to present.
Perfect. Thank you. You've done that so well, you must have experience. Okay, we're gonna start with Sheila Dormady. She's Commissioner Dormady, as we know her, but she also wears another hat for the city of Providence, and it's Chief of Policy and Resiliency. She will be testifying, introducing folks this evening in her role as Chief of Policy and Resiliency, and not as a commissioner of this committee. She may feel compelled not to speak about certain topics, not to answer any particular questions, for various reasons, that would conflict with her role of oversighting the contracts that we're speaking of. So we'll give you that leeway. With that, please, begin the presentation. I'm just gonna ask you to be the MC and host of everyone, because you have kindly put this whole presentation together, and we all thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I greatly appreciate this opportunity and the attention to all of the topics that we're going to cover here this evening. And your disclaimer notwithstanding, I'm very enthusiastic for talking about all of the aspects of all of these issues that we have before us here today. We have in front of us, we had talked about the Harvard Kennedy School presentation. We're not going to walk through that one tonight. That one is just for your files. But I will say that when we had students from the Harvard Kennedy School take a look at this during the fall semester last year, their deep dive into the issues here revealed some of the same themes that we have already been talking about here as a commission. So the need for more education and more focused education and enforcement, the need for more uniform carts and infrastructure, and some of the topics that we have talked about here today, the need for changes in the state law, including the concept of a bottle bill that would help to improve the diversion rates from our system, as well as how we manage our food waste. And so there's a lot that we're going to cover here today. This is intended to be a sampler pack of all of the issues that we would want to be considering as a commission as we develop our recommendations. And so each of these presenters is going to be about 10 minutes. The bottle bill might go up to 15 minutes, but we're going to keep everything pretty tight for what the presentations are, so that we have plenty of time for discussion of all of the topics that are here today. We're going to start in-house with our own Director of Sustainability, Priscilla De La Cruz, who is going to talk us through some of the existing programs that our sustainability department has begun. That's the one that you're looking at there. So your presentation looks like this. And you have more slides than we're going to spend time on in there too, because we also wanted this to be a reference document for us. But thank you, Priscilla, for pulling this together for us. You can state your name.
Yeah, Priscilla De La Cruz, Director of Sustainability, and really, well, yes, you can thank me for being here, but also thanking Kevin Roth, who's our Deputy Director, who put the presentation together. He's sad he could not join us, but maybe not that sad because he's on his way to Canada to vacation with his family. But Kevin Roth are hosting of the settling initiative, so I'm just going to give you a overview as to the work that he has with the community partners and also with other departments like DPW. So, food waste diversion and composting. So we'll dive right in. I'll give you an overview about the different funding streams that we have and where that is guided from. Really to know that it's all coming from our citywide climate goals that are guided by the Climate Justice Plan released in 2019. It includes an objective, to be a sustainable zero waste economy with a focus on supporting our local businesses. We can actually just move on to the next slide. So back in 2021, we worked with Zero Waste Providence, a local community-based organization, to develop this report and strategy, really focusing in on how we want to pursue a smaller scale community-based composting initiative. And that has really led to us successfully securing grants. So I'll be talking about a number of those grants, but I will keep it high level because we have some folks that are going to present about some of those composting initiatives here today. So Kevin wanted us to just give you a quick overview about what that report entails. So we really want to make sure that we're looking at our municipal solid waste. And what we found is that 30% of it is coming from organics, that the budget towards municipal solid waste is growing. Therefore 50% organics diversion in 21, there would have been more savings had we had a more focus on that. So that is driving the goals that we have in terms of how do we keep things local, how do we promote composting, how do we expand that capacity, how do we keep it high towards workforce development, and again, going back to our climate justice plan, centering our equity and justice goals. And I'm glad that today you also have a presenter that's going to talk a little bit more about composting and other things tied to, or not tied to anaerobic digestion. Strategies, Sheila already mentioned, so I won't go too into that, but you'll see that in terms of the grant that we've secured, there's a lot of collaboration tied to outreach, whether it is composting or recycling, but also that there is a need for expanding sites and facilities, but also that a lot of these things go hand in hand with policies and how we approach that at the municipal and the state level. So really no surprises in terms of the zero waste report. Next slide. So we're going to cover a few local initiatives. As we go through these slides, I just ask you to focus on, don't remember everything that's on here. As Sheila said, we copied for the record. But in terms of just the span of organizations that we're working with, I like to think about our sustainability department as a liaison or really catalyst for embedding some of these innovative pilots within city government and operationalizing them with Chief Hawkins, with DPW, and really bringing that alignment with community partners and looking at what are their needs to really get at some of the shared goals that we have. Next slide. So this is one of the smaller grants that we have through the Department of Agriculture focused on composting. It's really geared towards expanding backyard composting and looking at pairing that with mentorship. So we have this is already underway. We went through a competitive bidding process for this. In September, we hope to release more data as to how this program is doing. But again, this is in partnership with organizations like Providence Garden Works. We are working with Groundwork Rhode Island to repair existing sites, but also adding new drop-off sites as well. Next slide. Through the same grant, we also have money for education and marketing. Again, thinking about what are we well suited to do within government, but also realizing we are well suited to secure the funding, right? And to really figure out how to operationalize these things once they're successful. But in terms of the education, there are groups out there that are already doing this, like Zero Waste Providence. So partnering up with them to do that direct target outreach to really expand that backyard drop-off and collection for composting. The great thing is that we also have some technical assistance from Center for Equal Technology. They're supporting other, institutions, organizations to do this type of work to divert, food from the landfill. So they're supporting us as I am not gonna say much about this, but I wanna say that this is one of my favorite projects, the school cafeteria recycling project. You have, Jim here, who's gonna talk more about this, but since I came in, Kevin already had this on the works, we have secured the grants. But even when we look at opportunities for expanding the pilot projects that we have in schools or composting, for me, it's like, absolutely. Because kids are learning, they're the ones really championing the initiative and they're taking great pride. And they love when like city folks visit like the mayor and they get to talk about the success of the program. And we're also working with faculty to do that work. So Jim will tell you more about the impact of that work. And then some good feel examples of that work, backyard composting to schools. Next, Zero Waste Providence, this is some of the community gathering and convening that they do and outreach. Next. All right, more examples, more nice pictures. Okay, so we also have more money through the EPA Environmental Protection Agency to look at infrastructure for recycling. This is something also that down the line, Chief Hawkins can talk more about. But right now through the West End Compost Hub construction, working with the groundwork, we're looking at the construction of an in-vessel aerobic composter on a former brownfield in the West End of Providence. These organic capacity upgrades, we have someone here tonight that can talk more about that, but again, what are the needs, equipment to expand that facility? And then we also have, some technical assistance from, CET here, working with 40 food producing businesses and institutions. And I got ahead of myself on the recycling part. We can keep moving. You have everything you need to know about the Harvard Kennedy School report. So I will skip over that part in the interest of time because there's a lot there. But I will say it was really great working with these students. We asked them to do a lot in a span of 3 months. They looked at what was working in other cities that were comparable to our demographics. And then came back to us with looking at not only compliance, but also looking at other barriers, types of language and outreach. So it's really a worthwhile read. And I believe some of the things that they recommended, you'll see down the line that we're working to implement. One of the biggest grants that we have received is through the EPA. Right here it says approximately 2.5 million, and it's totally 3.4 million. We can continue going. So here's what we're working closely with DPW. We're going to be doing a pilot for businesses. To improve recycling and expand that. That work has not yet begun, but it will. And again, that's going to be with some technical assistance and support. And this is where Chief Hawkins can definitely talk more about. Kevin Crawford, Deputy Director, Chief Hawkins, and Chief Mancini are not only has there been money through this grant, but other funding to secure for improving our recycling parts, getting new recycling parts over time, and doing outreach, which was one of the recommendations of the Harvard Kennedy students, but also looking at different financing mechanisms for how we do that citywide, not only in a specific area, which was what this grant would have been for. So we can talk more about that down the line. We can continue. Again, lots of education and outreach. Yep, financing will cover that. Let's see if there was anything else I wanted to leave you. No, that's all. Thank you.
Perfect.
Well, that was a lot.
That was what I wanted to appreciate all of that.
Any commissioners, questions?
I have a question.
Commissioner Hisman, please.
On the earlier slide, you said that in 21, if we had 50% diversion of the natural waste, we're gonna save 750,000.
That would, I believe, if I interpret that correctly, and what Kevin wanted us to walk away with. That looking at that food waste accounting for that much, if we would have diverted that,
Yeah.
that would have resulted in that savings.
Okay.
Because one of the things it's not only an emission problem that we have with what's going to the landfill or with the fat recycling rates that we have, but also we're losing a lot of money. So if we can get food out of there, there's savings that could be had. And Sheila can correct me.
So what percentage are we at now?
Could you speak a little louder? I can't hear you on this side.
What percentage are we at now
Of food waste?
of diversion? So,
Zero. We don't
or we don't do any compost.
just the volunteer programs.
And my other question about the composting,
Please continue.
does the composting, is it shipped away? Because for me, it doesn't seem like it would be sustainable if everyone's just piling it up in their backyard.
I think remix are gonna hear more about where that composting goes now.
Okay.
That's a great question.
Commissioners, you're all set. We have a councilman. Do you have any questions?
I do. So, great presentation, thank you very much. Great. But like, I got my eye, the last one, when you saying that we're working hard to get a bunch of, the cars to 95 gallon. Do we have any program how we can educate the people or how we can work against the rats? Because no matter we put there, they will need plastic. If you buy a 10 can a car today, by tomorrow we have a Ford in it, so that car is not worth anything. Do we have any plan to work before we order $11 million into products and recycled products? Do we have a plan to work against the rats?
We do.
What is it?
DPW is trying some different, rat abatement techniques that we're rolling out in different places, so we are working on that. I don't think it's true that every car gets eaten by rats as soon as we put them out, but, it is a work stream that DPW has taken on.
I know we've talked to Mo, and she's walking through some of the initiatives that are related to.
So are you all set with that question? Good, okay. Just a clarification on the grants, there's a lot of grants that are coming in, so good for you for getting, this program started and winning those grants. So is it 3.6 in total that you discussed tonight? That was my quick math.
So we have, 3.4 total for the, US EPA Swiffer grants. Then we have, about 332 from the Department of Agriculture for compost. And then, I'm estimating that once we complete what we're securing for the recycling project, for the parts, it's gonna be about 850.
Okay, could I ask, the restrictions on this funding and the timeline and deliverables? Do you have, what's that all about? Enlighten us or speak to that if you can.
Yeah, most of them have about 2 to 3 year deadlines. I think the only one that's a 3-year is the EPA one, the biggest one, the 4. The others are 2 years. And they all come with their specific milestones, and we would be happy to share that information.
I think that we'd like to see that, if you wouldn't mind making that available. That's a lot of money, and it's certainly, a good cause, and can be very effective.
Yes.
I think we just should see what that all entails.
Yeah, absolutely, and we can also share with you our timeline for implementing that. We've already issued a few RFPs, and it's definitely high on our priority list to make sure they're implemented on time.
So also drop-off sites. So I noticed that the library was my library, Mount Pleasant Library, best library in the whole system, Fifth Ward, but it's more seriously, I'm sorry. I've noticed that there was a drop-off site and I got really excited about it. And I've asked people about it and I wasn't able to get too much information. Also, I was excited to see this here. But the larger question is, why just Mount Pleasant? Is that just a test case? Has the entire library system been engaged? And if they have, or, can these funds be used to broaden that? I think all council people think of their community libraries as community centers, hubs of activity. And I just think that it's, I don't want to say a no-brainer, but it seems very, it would be very efficient and effective if we could, utilize those those outdoor spaces for drop-off sites. Has there been any work on that, or is that something that is being contemplated?
We haven't gotten to the point of contemplating the full expansion, really with the grant funding we had and the community partners. It was more about where do we have the capacity to first do it, and then the EPA wanted us to be specific about the sites, and they gave us some very clear criteria about the demographics and the areas. So based on that, we decided for those first sites, but ideally, we would be looking at growing the resources and the capacity we have.
Okay,
And expanding.
wonderful. Any other questions for anyone else?
I would just to your point, Councilwoman, I'm hoping part of this the commission's recommendations could be whether or not we should include the scaling of composting opportunities for residents as part of this RFP that we are making recommendations for.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Courtney, because we collaborated, or I would say wrote a letter of support for the Rhode Island Policy Council. They had a proposal for just that to the EPA, but it did not get funded. But we have the grant if we wanted to go to that route, but it is going to take funding.
That's a great recommendation that we should pursue. Thank you. Okay, Councilman, Councilman.
I'll take it.
Thank you very much, Chair. Last question, you mentioned the drop off of gasoline. Gasoline is going to be the recreation area, or it's going to be the parks area, or it's going to be within the lake area? Because this,
I do not know, but I can find out.
we had three,
It's at the rec.
we had three locations, but the lake doesn't have much land, open land, like where it's going to be the drop off, on the park.
I don't know, but I can get a clear answer for you. I will say that there are, and Courtney might know more about this, but there is a redesign of the rec coming through some funding that we got. But I can find out where the drop off curve is.
I would like to know because I have a percentage.
Yeah.
And I look like everybody is taking decisions without let the councilman what's going on. Like they want to do a party without inviting the person who's percentage. So I would like to get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We can have you connect with the community members who are leading.
Commission members, anyone else? Okay, well, thank you very much. We appreciate your contribution. Okay, up next, who do we have?
We're gonna have Kevin Boudris is the Deputy Director of Just Zero and has been part of a state process for looking at bottle bill legislation for Rhode Island. Bottle bill basically meaning a deposit and return system. You pay 5 or 10 cents for a certain type of container and you get your money back when you bring it back. Thank you. I appreciate you making the time to be with us here today, Kevin. You gotta state your name and position for us.
Thank you, Sheila. My name is Kevin Boudris, and I'm the Deputy Director at a nonprofit organization called Just Zero. I'm
We are
also-
on exhibit 9 for anybody. Okay,
Thank you.
sorry, continue.
No. I'm also a Providence city resident, so both professionally and personally, I'm very interested in what you all are,
We'd like to hear that. I hope you live in the 5th ward.
I do not.
It's all right.
Number three.
So I'm gonna be talking with you all primarily about bottles and what a bottle bill could do to the city of Providence when it comes to the challenges you all are facing. Just quickly, to start, a few words about Just Zero, for those of you who aren't familiar with us. We are a member-supported 501c3 nonprofit organization. We work throughout the country, including here in Rhode Island, alongside communities, policymakers, scientists, educators, organizers, and others, to implement just and equitable zero waste solutions that confront the toxic and climate damaging waste crisis that we are all facing, especially places like Providence. Next slide, please. We take a holistic approach to our work. We work to shut down aging, dangerous waste facilities like leaking landfills, climate damage incinerators, but also to implement real policy solutions that are intended to stop waste before it starts. And that's what we're really talking about when we talk about zero waste, stopping waste before it starts. Our work is based on three main pillars: education, policy, and community engagement. As I mentioned, I'm going to focus most of what I talk about here to you all on the bottle bill. I'm going to do a quick little overview about how bottle bills work, why they work, the impact that they've had in states and countries where they exist currently, the types of impacts that they've had in Providence, as well as talk about the status of the bottle process in Rhode Island. So quick overview. As I mentioned, at zero waste, at just zero waste solutions, bottle bills are going to be the most effective zero waste solutions that we have at our fingertips right now. Next slide, please. And the kind of pro and con of bottle bills when it comes to what you all are doing here. The pro is that bottle bills are entirely producer funded. They are one of the original and most effective forms of what's called producer responsibility. The onus is on the producers and distributors that profit off of beverage containers to take these things back and recycle them in an effective way, and sometimes even reduce them. The con of bottle bills, of course, is that they require state laws. And so there's only so much that the city of Providence can do, but support for a strong bottle bill. If we could just go back one slide, please. Oh, no, that's okay. That's okay. So the key feature of a bottle, also called the positive difference system, because the key feature is small reflective deposits. A consumer pays 5 or 10 cents when they purchase a beverage, a can or a bottle, and they get that money back when they return it, they recycle or reuse. Next slide, please. Those deposits, small as they are a powerful incentive. They incentivize folks to, rather than throw their beverage containers in the trash, bring them back to a retailer or empty center to be recycled. Rather than throw them out the window or leave them at beach or in a park, they bring them back to be recycled. And indeed, these deposits incentivize folks to pick them up off the ground because they get paid to bring them back to these recycling locations. That means better collection, better recycling, and less litter. And indeed, bottle bill states have half the litter of, when it comes to beverage containers, of non-bottle bill states. And in general, twice the recycling rates. They're a huge difference. Next slide. Behind the scenes, there's a lot that goes into bottle bills, but one of the important features that I want to mention is what's called. And this is really what makes these systems funded and put up by the producers and the distributors, not states, not cities, no cost to residents, so on and so forth. The handling fee is a separate fee that producers and distributors pay to the retailers and independent redemption centers that are collecting these containers from consumers and residents. That helps fund the robust network of redemption locations. These programs only work if they're competing, right? You don't want folks to pay a deposit on a container and then not be able to get that deposit. That doesn't work. That's inequitable. We want there to be as many redemption locations as possible. And when the producers and distributors are on the hook for paying for those locations, it makes the system work. And at the same time, it helps create local jobs. People need to work at retailers and at redemption centers, take these containers back, to sort them, to get them to distributors. Next slide, please. So the best bottle bills that we see all across the country, they have strong 10-cent deposit that's tied to the redemption target, it's modern and high performing. They include all beverage containers, especially things like the terrible little alcohol nips that we see everywhere on our roads, the heavy wine bottles and liquor bottles. They incorporate that handling fee. They incorporate both return to retail and those independent redemption centers, a wide variety of redemption technologies that make it easy for people to do. And importantly, in the best bottle bills, they reinvest under the deposits back in the system. So when I talk about impact in a second, we're gonna see that that's bottle bills generally hit about 80% redemption target. That still means that 20% of containers aren't being brought in. That means that those deposits aren't being collected. So you've got all that money left over. That money can be reinvested in the system, ideally through grant programs that are administered by the state. So then you've got all this money that can be rolled out to cities like Providence to do education programs, to reinvest in, to invest in recycling, to invest in reuse, all the types of things that this commission in particular is exploring. My next slide. So bottle bill impacts. First and foremost, we know from the states and countries that have bottle bills in their pocket. 10 states in the country, including our neighbors in Connecticut, Massachusetts, have bottle bill programs. 45 countries across the world have bottle bill programs, and more than 290 people, 290 million people across the world live in communities with bottle bills. And every time polling is done in those communities, people like the bottle bills because they keep litter off the streets, because they're an effective recycling program, because they can easily get their deposits back when it's well run. The most recent polling that we had is from our neighbor in Massachusetts, where 82% of registered voters supported making Massachusetts bottle bill even better. People like these programs, they want them to work well. They like these programs, next slide, because as I mentioned earlier, they improve collection, they improve recycling, they reduce litter, they reduce jobs. Oregon and Michigan have 10-cent deposits, that kind of gold standard right now in the US. And as I mentioned, those best programs get 80% redemption rate. 9 of the 10 US states that have the highest recycling rates have bottle bills. That enough makes it clear that if states want to perform well when it comes to recycling, they can't do it without bottle bill. It's an essential element alongside the cost per recycling. Litter. Hawaii is the most recent state to implement a bottle bill program. They did it in 2005, and within 2 years, they saw a 53% reduction in the amount of beverage containers that were collected. It's a drastic difference right away in jobs. That handling fee that creates that robust network, it means that bottle bills can create up to 38 times as many jobs as curbside recycling. Those are good jobs in the community supported by money paid by producers. So, opportunities for Rhode Island as a whole. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit more on Providence. Right now, statewide, Rhode Island's only collecting about 39% of its beverage containers for recycling. We know that rate is significantly lower in Providence, given Providence recycling. There's a big difference there between 80% and we know a bottle bill can get us there. And according to Resource Recovery's latest waste characterization study, we are landfilling about 17,000 tons of beverage containers every single year. They're filling up our landfill. We know we can convert them to bottle. And we know from friends, places like Safe Bay, that beverage containers are routinely the most collected item collected during the next step. So looking a little closer at Providence, and so I took some of the numbers that I know you all have received from Resource Recovery on trash generation and recycling. So as Resource Recovery presented to you all, Providence is generating about 75,000 tons of trash per year. Almost 18,000 of those tons are recycling. We also know from separate analyses done by Resource Recovery that about 3.2% what's in our trash in general, overall in Rhode Island, is bottle material. Plastic beverage containers, aluminum cans, glass bottles. And when I say bottle material, I mean the types of containers covered in the plastic. And we also know that about 37.5% of our single-stream recycling is bottle material. Next slide, please. When we take into account the waste that Providence is generating, projected recycling waste that Providence is paying, that means that a modern bottle bill could divert more than 3,800 tons of waste just from rejected recycling loads each year. It could also divert a little bit more than 1,800 tons of waste from municipal solid waste loads. Those things combined, when we're looking at that $115 per ton tip fee for can, could save Providence more than $600,000 each year at fees alone. Again, a program that will be stood up by producers, paid for by producers, and the city and the state will have to pay for themselves. Of course, there are those other benefits, use litter, create local jobs, and again, those unredeemed deposits, some portion of that, which could, based on calculations that others have done, at an 80% redemption rate, given how many bottles and cans are sold in Rhode Island, could be on the order of $10 million a year. A significant portion of that could be provided in grant funding to cities like Providence to improve education. So let it get another potential grant. So where are we on this, Rhode Island, right? Bottle bills have been introduced in the General Assembly each of the last 5 legislative sessions. Obviously, since I've been talking with you all about this, they have not passed. Momentum has built, and there's a lot of support in the General Assembly. And as Sheila mentioned earlier, I am one of the members of a joint legislative bottle bill study commission that was enabled by legislation in 2023, which recently extended in this past legislative session. And we are hoping that commission within the next few months into this next legislative session will hopefully result in a good piece of legislation that got support from both chambers in the General Assembly. And I know that support from the city of Providence for that piece of legislation will probably go along. I focus mostly on bottle bill. I know I probably use up a lot of my time. Just want to mention quickly 2 other solutions that the recent waste pay-as-you-throw programs could be really effective, where residents pay per bag of trash that they throw away. They've been shown to reduce waste by as much as 50% within a year. There are always cost concerns around these programs. Concerns around them being aggressive tax, right? Folks are paying $1 per bag, for example. That is going to impact some residents significantly more than others. But other cities, in doing the good work of figuring out how to do this in the best way, have come up with alternatives where folks can be provided with free bags or reduced cost bags, or every household automatically gets a set number of bags that they start each month with, and they only have to pay if they go over, which most people won't, because the best thing about pay-as-you-throw programs is that they help folks kind of pay attention to what's in their trash, make different choices without adding a layer. Next slide, please. And the packaging reduction and recycling costs. This is another initiative of the system that the General Assembly would have to act on. But Rhode Island has considered legislation like this in recent years, and we hope they will continue to do so. When these laws are designed in the best possible way, they require consumer brands and packaging manufacturers to reduce the packaging and improve recyclability. It's yet another form of producer responsibility. Like a bottle bill, it's the onus on the people, that the companies that are frankly creating these problems in the first place, to change the way they do their business so that they generate less trash. Because at the end of the day, these beverage containers, this packaging, it isn't really our trash, right? We didn't make the decision to sell beverage containers and single beverages and single-use containers. Producers of those containers. Bottle bills, programs like this, put the onus back on them. With that, that's all I had. Thanks so much for having me. Happy to answer any questions about bottle bills and fees.
Wonderful presentation. I thank you very much. And we could listen to you for half an hour more. And probably are going to call you back in if you'd be so kind to do so. Position. Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for our guest this evening? Any questions?
I have a question.
Chief Hawkins?
What kinds of changes do you expect have to be made in whatever version of legislation is introduced this year that's gonna get it over the finish line?
It's a good question.
Seems simple to me, so.
Yeah, certainly every version of legislation that's been introduced over the last few years, I think would have created a great program for achieve the goals that I mentioned. I think that one of the biggest hurdles when it comes to actually passing is resistance from retailers, from producers, from distributors who don't want to have to bear the cost of pollution. I think that there's a lot that can be done by the study commission. Speaking as myself, just you're not on the application, of course, but that can be done to explore ways to thread the needle with retailers, especially on kind of coming up with a solution that works best for them. A lot of retailers don't want to have to take these containers back, but we also know that retailers aren't required to take containers back, and there aren't going to be enough places to bring boxes. And so I think that we still have a lot of opportunities, frankly, to explore options that only the largest retailers take back. Maybe if they form their own type of user or responsibility organization and certain program, they can select independent redemption networks, independent redemption center networks in the locations for those centers to make sure that, for example, something like, well, there's still, one redemption location for every 2,000 residents in fifth grade. So that we know it's still going to be convenient, and then maybe they can be accepted. There are a lot of things to explore, and I hope that those retailers who are representing our mission come to the table and explore some of that. There's a lot of different ways to do this, and I do very much believe that allowing kind of right now it works for consumers, works for retailers.
You had mentioned Mass and Connecticut, bordering states have bottle bills. How long have they been in operation? Are they recent or many years?
Many decades.
Isn't that amazing?
Like 1990.
Both Connecticut and Massachusetts implemented their systems in the 30s. So they've been humming for 40 years. And a state like Connecticut, it started with a 5-cent deposit in the 80s. That deposit, obviously, given inflation, had less value over time. Recently updated its deposit to 10 cents. Recently expanded the type of containers that are covered in the 80s. There were energy drinks, there were iced coffees in containers, and now that includes all of that stuff. So not only have our neighbors had these programs for 40 years, but they've taken action to make them better. And we're kind of frustratedly still sitting here. So the program is great, it always worked, it was easy. No, it's not me.
So I can't believe they've had them for as many years as they have. Have the experience of our neighboring states, has that had any compelling impact up on the Hill with the legislature? And have they addressed some of the challenges or the pushback that you're getting on the Hill, on our Hill?
Yes, I think a lot of, as I mentioned, when I said kind of momentum has been building, I see it in a lot of, with a lot of the legislators that one folks are interested, one folks are pushing back. And I think to your point about looking for our neighboring states, I think that there are a lot of folks in both the House and Senate who are increasingly frustrated each year that goes by.
But aren't they the same producers, the large producers? Aren't they the producers in Rhode Island, the same producers in Connecticut and Mass?
Yep.
So those arguments are,
They can do it there, right?
Yep.
They're selling plenty of Coke and Pepsi, beer,
Yeah,
and wine.
hasn't stopped the sales.
Mhm.
Okay, you had at one point in your presentation talked about different bottles. You said, cans, different bottles. What did you mean by that? Or could you just, and nips, you said nips could be, so you can carve or craft your program, so all of those types of cans and bottles and nips and whatever are included, or you could just restrict your program. And does Mass and Connecticut do that, or do they take everything?
So Mass and Connecticut, have slightly different approaches because Connecticut most recently updated its program. It's a little more comprehensive than Massachusetts. But even still, Connecticut doesn't include liquor and wine in their program, even though they include beer. So they don't include this, which frankly was kind of a missed opportunity, the latest time they modernized. In terms of who's kind of doing it, the best looking beyond Connecticut and Mass, Maine includes just about everything in their program. They only recently in the last few years updated their program to include NIPS. And early data returns show, just like everything else, maybe there are fewer NIPS on, literally suggests there are fewer NIPS on the ground in Maine now. Not a huge surprise, but to your question about like how it can be designed, recent versions of the bill that have been considered by the legislature have basically included a broad definition. Anything that comes, anything that you drink, comes in a container from 50 milliliters all the way up to 3 liters is included in the program, not including things like medicine or replacement, or those types of things. It would be frankly inappropriate for a lot of those to include the medications. But there's no reason it can't include anything else in the good thing.
So is there a model that, is close to being accepted in Rhode Island, that you folks in your commission capacity are looking at, that you could share with us, or, you know, I guess where are we at with the legislation? And I'd be interested in seeing it, and I think the commission members would also be interested in seeing it. Full disclosure, I support a bottle bill. I was the leading advocate for plastic bag ban in the city of Providence, and I lobbied up on the Hill for it statewide. So I support a bottle bill. I think it's a common sense approach to, you know, a real problem, and it's only going to get worse. And everyone else has been doing it for a long time. We're way behind the 8th wall here. So if whatever you have that you can share with us, we'd be interested in seeing that. And Commissioner Dormady, could I ask you to follow up and make that available to the commissioners? I wish you well. Is there anyone else who has any?
Yeah, question.
Commissioner Husband.
In a situation where there's a 10-cent deposit on a can, what would the handling fee have to be? And would that be a per can fee or per container fee?
So the handling fees are per container fees.
Yeah.
And they are, they're independent from the deposit, Holden says it's separate fee, deposit fees, deposit, like that, the values of those two don't necessarily correlate as much as like, what's the right number that will work in a state Rhode Island in terms of like, how much does it cost retailers? And how much does it cost redemption center to take these containers back? States in our area, you know, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New York are pretty good comparisons in terms of the cost. They have handling fees that range from, I think, 3 cents at the lowest up to, I think, 4.5 cents at the highest. So something in that neighborhood of 4 cents per container, getting paid by the distributor, and the customer doesn't pay that fee. Seems like it would work in the sense of like, that's enough money to compensate the retailers for the containers they're taking back. And some of these big retailers, they sell a lot of volume, right? So if they are taking tens of thousands of containers back within days, isn't outside of the realm of possibility. That's a lot of money going right back to the retailer to understand people and the technology that they need to lead.
Great. Anything else? Commissioner Bernard.
Just really quick, so I don't know if I missed it, but what is the pushback for this not getting passed?
A lot, the pushback that kind of we see in a more public sense is from retailers saying, well, we don't want to be responsible. Okay, we're in the business of selling, for instance, we're in the business of selling beverages, we're not recycling. I think that, it. Change is part of it. That's always part of it. They have a system that works. Honestly, like one of their concerns that they voiced that has a certain amount of merit to it is, okay, all this stuff comes back to us, we need to carve out the space to store it. Until the producers and distributors that have to come to retailers to take off the empty containers, that's on them. But still, the store has to find a place to store it. That might reduce the amount of merchandise they have. That's a real concern. Of course, the handling fee is inherent cost for that. So if you set the handling fee right now, then hopefully it doesn't matter because they're made for the extra work.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. And just one follow-up question. The pay as you throw, I just found that very intriguing. Is there a practicing city that you could cite that I could just look at to see how they do that? Because there's all the questions of, does that include dumping? Does that for the areas that, for areas that can't afford it, how does that look like for their households? Is it subsidized? Those kind of things. So do you have a city that we could take a look at?
Yes, there are a lot of cities, and along with providing some of these other materials, I would be happy to send along some case studies and stuff like that. Just off the top of my head, certainly a good city I think to look at by way of example is Worcester, which has had a patient for a program for a long time, and certainly in terms of location is in general size is a decent.
Okay, it was just an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Great presentation, thank you.
I like that too. So I'm gonna ask I'm sorry,
Madam Chair,
Vice Chair Espinal.
I'll be quick. I just want to add this comment because you said that was so far behind. Well, what I'm gonna say is gonna make you feel worse. Because I remember 50 years ago, I come from a small town in the Dominican Republic by the countryside, undeveloped 50 years ago. I was about 8 years old, and I remember that there was a program like this. There was a small corner store that if you brought the bottles, I don't remember what it was, if it was 2 pennies or what that was, but you could see all the kids picking up bottles because that was ice cream money. Yeah, that's 50 years ago in a third world country. So that's really sets us behind. And incentives really do work. And you can see that when it comes to car batteries, you don't see car batteries anywhere. Because when you buy a new battery, you bring the core, you bring the used battery. Yeah. I think it's, I don't know if it's $10 or $15. So that's part of your rebate. That's part of your immediate savings. So they do work. I just want to add that comment.
Thank you very much.
15 years ago.
Whoa, you don't look that old.
No, I don't. Which is why I stand so proud.
There you go. I was gonna share my youth, but I'm not.
Oh, sorry.
Councilman Providence, you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much. So how much would be the total money to, let's say, the state next regulation next year will pass? How long would they that program to kick off, that everything get ready, or how much money would cost these companies to get set up?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of the legislation that the state has considered in recent years would create roughly a 3-year runway to get, legislation goes into effect and the deposits kick in 3 years later, which based on Wise experience, which is the most recent state these programs, but 20 years ago, and what's going on before 3 years is coming. Upfront costs to the producer and distributors is a little bit harder to figure out. That's a question that's come up recently, and I've been talking to some folks in Oregon. Speaking of examples, Oregon is a state that folks in the legislature are looking at, and they kind of have that producer-run system where the producers form a producer responsibility organization. And so because they operate in selective, they kind of have a better sense of overall costs among everyone. Hoping to get some of that information. pass on to the study commission at the state house, but also would be happy to pass that information on to you all as well.
Okay, please, we've got a long list of people waiting.
I'm sorry, I'll take that. Can we use a grant money to start off and then get the money back?
I think because it depends on what the state does in legislation to create the grant program, but it could be anything. And that's kind of one of those situations that, I think, especially as hopefully the legislature is considering a piece of legislation, hearing from the city of Providence on what it might be in a grant program that's funded by deposits, go a long way.
So why don't we do this? In the interest of time, why don't we ask you to work with Commissioner Dormady to enlighten her as to what the program that you're proposing might look like, and try to model or craft what it would look like for Providence as best that you can. And then, not that you would be bringing that to this committee, but you certainly can testify to it in a broader context. Chief Office.
Can cities implement a bottle bill on their own, or does it need to be state law?
It's, I think technically a secret. There's nothing certainly as I see it in, Rhode Island state law that will prevent Providence from doing that. I think there would be certain challenges. In other work that Chelsea does, we're working with, the District of Columbia, with Washington DC to stand up like their own bottle bill program, but that's a little different because it's kind of its own federal district. I think it would be really cool if cities could start putting them up. I can imagine that much more retailer resistance to that type of thing. Kind of, you're amplifying the cross-border concerns.
So along that same vein, though, you just provided testimony that we might be 2-3 years out for any implementation. In response to Councilman Vargas's question, is there something that the municipalities can do to gear up during that 3-year period? That should be contemplated in your commission's work, I would think. And Providence, I think, when we make the recommendation, if we make the recommendations, which I think we would like to make that recommendation to support a water bill on, it would be nice to be able to understand what that ramp up might look like as well. So you're going to be working very closely with Commissioner Dormady and sharing, enlightening her, and she'll share the fruits of that effort with us. All right?
Sounds great.
And we may have you back, because we like you, and this was a great presentation. And we should have been doing this. What do they say? Best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago.
Right.
We should have been doing this a long time ago. It's, I'm excited that you're working on it, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Commissioner Doherty is next.
If I can suggest, because of where we are related to the clock, and our discussions are the most interesting part of the commission for sure. I might suggest we do these next 2 presentations back to back and then do questions together
good.
afterwards, so we
You should be
can
running
work our
this
way
thing.
through,
You've
if
got
that's
doing
okay.
really well, I know.
I might have overscheduled us, and I appreciate all of the enthusiasm for these topics. We're gonna go to Leo Pollack, who's one of the founders of Remix Organics, and talk a little bit more about what the scalable side of food waste diversion looks like. Thank you, Leo. If you can do the name and title,
Yeah.
please.
So Leo Pollack, co-founder and managing partner. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for being here. And a big hello to Nicole, from all of us who miss her dearly.
Some people know my better app, so thank you. Wait a sec. Some of this is gonna touch on issues that Priscilla mentioned, so I'll try to go through those as quickly as possible. Just real quickly, I think just to frame kind of scope scale of the issue.
So a lot of different terms thrown out around this. Sometimes you'll hear food waste, sometimes wasted food. That's now the EPA's preferred term. In the waste industry, a lot of times it's just called organics. So things that would break down or produce odor or things like that. So I'm gonna probably use organics and food waste, but just know those are all interchangeable. So big scale problem. Nationally, 66 million tons of wasted food go to landfills every year. That's coming from food retail, so grocery stores, food service, universities, institutions, as well as residential. The reason this has become more and more of an issue in kind of the popular press and kind of on people's radar is that landfills are a significant producer of methane. So 11% of methane emissions globally come from landfills. In the US, landfills are the third largest methane sort of methane emitter. Most of that methane is because food and organic waste is going to landfills. So food and organic waste breaking down without oxygen produces methane. Methane is a significant greenhouse gas, more potent than carbon dioxide, which is the normal here. So, real quick, only point of this slide is Project Drawdown was kind of what are different ways that individuals can reduce impacts on climate change. Food waste was identified in that Paul Hawkins, an environmentalist, has started this Project Drawdown. Food waste is one of the biggest intervention points that we can make to make a significant reduction in those methane emissions from landfills.
Could you speak to the educating girls? I'm serious.
Oh, speak to educating.
Do you have educating girls on this broadband white chart?
I think so. These are obviously thinking about global, and the education gap between boys and girls, especially in certain countries. So that's, I can't speak to that specifically, but that's one of the issues is
Caught my eye.
education as seeing a critical issue for helping people understand climate issues overall. So in terms of the kind of diving into this a little bit at the municipal level, I'll kind of key takeaways. Priscilla, these numbers have been thrown around by Kevin as well. About 73,000 tons of solid waste went to Rhode Island Resource Recovery last year from the city of Providence. I put the fee schedule, obviously this is for all municipalities. I think one of the things that has been a barrier to talking about food waste diversion is always the perception that if those programs are in place, because Rhode Island is a unique state in that the municipal tip fees are in a separate category than commercial tip fees. The sense has always been that if food waste diversion is competitive on the commercial side, because municipalities pay lower tip fees, it's a much harder starting place. My professional opinion looking at this is the tip fees in that $58 to $63 range. Obviously, the trend is those municipal tip fees are going up every year. The general tip fee rate in Southern New England for the types of facilities that manage food waste, large compost facilities, large anaerobic digesters, are competitive with that. So I think now we're seeing a place where kind of the market in the work icon is growing up. There's more facilities online, there's more market competition. You're starting to see then price points that are definitely competitive in the commercial space, and now are starting to open up the conversation around being competitive for the municipality. So that's something new. I'll move on from there. Thanks. So just to give, Kevin referenced in 2015, Rhode Island Resource Recovery did a waste characterization study. That was really to try to look at like, what is in municipal solid waste? We hear this like, this many tons were sent. So they actually did a program where they took sample loads from different municipal loads from resource recovery, literally sorted everything out and separated it. So to me, just glancing at this, there are 3 categories right off the top that are easily accepted by
compost for anaerobic digestion facilities. Vegetative food waste, vegetable peelings, rotten fruit, things like that, coffee grounds, tea leaf. Compostable paper, meaning napkins, paper towels, and protein food waste, so meaning any kind of meats, dairy, seafood. So that, if you take and look at, that number for municipalities is about estimated at about 27%. I think the number I heard from Priscilla was about 30, essentially a third of all the municipal trash is food waste that could be diverted and put to a higher net use. And I think that's if you're gonna take one takeaway from this, literally 1/3 of everything that goes to the trash is producing methane and could go to something better. For the commercial sector, especially for restaurants, that's way, it's probably 50–60%. Move to the next slide. So I just want to cover this quickly because I think this is hopefully a helpful kind of primer. I work in, I don't come from the waste sector originally, but having been in it for almost a decade, everything is talked about in tons. Not most people are not thinking about, oh, a ton of trash. So what does that actually look like? So to give you an idea, very kind of easy numbers, 5-gallon bucket, right? If you were to fill that with food waste from your house, full, it's going to be about 20 pounds. So 100 of those buckets would equal 1 ton. The types of trash containers we use in commercial, restaurants, institutions, similar to the type of waste containers DPW picks up from city residents. I live in city of Providence. Those full would be about 200 pounds. So 10 of those bins would be about a ton. When you get into larger, then you're talking about like an industrial facility may produce a ton or multiple tons in a single day. So you're talking about kind of a different scale. But to give you an idea, my kind of back of the numbers calculation was if you were to look at about that 30% number with the amount of municipal solid waste the city is sending, each resident probably would produce about 30 to 40 buckets a year. So essentially a bucket a weekish, a bucket every other week, depending on the household, how many people, how much you're cooking, how much you're eating out, things like that. I think it's worth getting into, and I want to just explain this really quickly. So the EPA has kind of changed the way they think about prioritizing what we do with wasted food. So they've moved from a pyramid to a more flexible scale. I think the basic idea of this is the number one way to stop food waste is to prevent it at the source. So people should be buying less, thinking about how they store food. There are strategies that EPA is putting out, and there have been programs, City of Providence and others that have done to help residents think about how do you produce less food waste. That's the best intervention possible. When you start getting, it's obviously then donating, feeding people, feeding animals, and then kind of on the same plane would be composting and anaerobic digestion. And the 10-second explanation of those is composting is taking food waste, so what's called green waste, mixing it with carbon, wood chips, leaves, things like that, producing a soil event. Anaerobic digestion is taking food waste and other organic waste like that. It basically puts it into a giant tank and produces methane similar to what would be happening in a landfill, but in a enclosed environment. So food waste produces methane, that methane is captured, it's clean, and it goes into our gas pipelines as renewable natural gas. So as a replacement for the gas we use for heating, for cooking. So most anaerobic digestion facilities are literally connected to the pipelines and putting gas back into the system. It's, to my knowledge, the only renewable gas. So it's replacing gas that would normally come from things like fracking. So lowest, again, just to top it up, lowest priority on that would be incinerating that, putting food waste down the drain, so garbage disposals, not a great solution. All it does is put food waste into the sewer system. Or, putting it in the trash. Those would all be at the bottom of the priority list and what we want to move people away from. So real quick, Remix Organic, we actually started at the compost plant, we're Providence based, my partner Nat lives in Providence, I live in Providence. We're based actually in South Providence, just off of Eddy Street. We are a organic waste hauler, we don't do trash recycling, we just do food waste. Prioritizing, our focus is really on commercial, institutional, and industrial scale. So we service restaurants, coffee shops, universities, hospitals, large food processing facilities, food producers. And we bring that material, we essentially work with different generators of that, figure out how to collect it, how to move it, and get it to either compost facilities or anaerobic digesters. Mostly in Rhode Island, some in Massachusetts as well. Real quick, we are based in a development just off Eddy Street in Councilman Espinal's district, and a big thank you to Councilman Espinal who's been supportive. That's kind of there's a mini industrial park there, a number of industrial tenants, but I think a really unique opportunity there to show that this kind of work can happen in a city. It can be done responsibly. It can help manage things like odors, things like concerns about rodents. That getting those things out of the normal trash also help with those kinds of issues. So trash is less likely to smell, is less likely to attract rodents if food waste isn't in it. So if food waste is in separate containers, it's picked up regularly. Those are the kind of interventions that are going to actually reduce those things, even though those are normally the concerns that people have. Here's kind of the big picture Rhode Island. So those numbers are taken from resource recovery. There's about 156 tons per day of commercial food waste and about 200 tons a day estimated residential food waste. My advice would be all solutions that manage that at different scales are appropriate and should be encouraged. It's really exciting to hear the work that Priscilla and the sustainability office. To me, it's community level intervention. So it's people composting in their backyard. It's community drop sites. It's programs like groundwork and harvest cycle with an in-vessel system in Providence. Those are going to manage a small piece of that bigger tonnage, but they're part of the solution as well. So our farm-based facilities, there's one farm-based facility in Rhode Island right now in Charlestown. Probably not the most realistic solution for waste coming out of Providence. There aren't any right now farm-based anaerobic digesters. There are a number of those in Massachusetts. There is an industrial scale anaerobic digester in Johnston, actually right down the street from Rhode Island Resource Recovery. It's run by a company called Energia. They have additional capacity. We work with them. There's right now primarily commercial waste going there. To my knowledge, there isn't any residential food waste that's being diverted to digester, but that is absolutely a critical piece of infrastructure that's 15 miles as the crow flies from where we're standing. So, so the infrastructure is starting to be there, and that then opens up kind of the opportunities. So, I'll throw out a couple in the interest of time. I think in general, and from hearing lessons, seeing kind of what's happened with the recycling space, a real challenge. I would always suggest with food waste, an opt-in program is the place to start. Because the people who want to participate, they have a chance to do that. They tend to want to do it the right way. There's some education involved in that, but that would be the way to start. I think to call out Mayor Wu in Boston just rolled out Boston. That program is structured that way. Opt-in, limited amount of space, free to residents. I'm sure there are a lot of hiccups that haven't been publicized, but that's a program that started in partnership with a couple waste haulers and facilities. It's both composting and anaerobic digestion, and they're pretty transparent about that in they talk about food waste becoming clean energy and nutrient-rich compost, so residents aren't assuming it's one thing and then feeling like they haven't been honest about where it's going. I think the idea of the question around food waste is how do you think about getting it in small quantities, the bucket problem, to a point where it's aggregated to something large enough that it's appropriate to then go to an anaerobic digester or compost facility. And that is really the kind of $1 million question right now in the sector. That there's trials on how to do that. There's models we've seen from Europe, but there's no place that has figured this out and we're ready to copy. Really quick on the commercial side, Rhode Island does have a food waste ban. So that basically mandates that large generators of food waste, it's over 2 tons a week. So that would be bigger hospitals, bigger universities are mandated to send food waste to a licensed facility if there's a facility within 15-mile radius. Enforcement of that has been close to zero, but the legislation on the books at least sends the signal that this is the direction it's going. And I think there's a real opportunity, Priscilla talked about it, but continuing to support different kinds of infrastructure around this, I think is critical because that has really been the gap. The interest is there, the numbers and the tonnage are certainly there. It's a question of kind of matching interest, infrastructure, and then any facilities that can handle. And I think, as been shown, leading by example and kind of focusing on schools, places like that where there's food waste or education component, those are really the kind of make sense of the story.
Well done. That was excellent and very brief. Commissioners, questions?
Do we want to do questions now, or do we want to do?
Oh, I'm sorry, I agreed
The
with
chair's choice.
you. You're my
obviously.
co-chair.
I got your back.
So, do we want to go right into the next presentation?
If folks are okay with that, thank you so much, Leo. We really appreciate you making the time and pulling this together for us. Our final presentation of the evening is our birthday present to Jim Corwin from the Rhode Island Schools Recycling Project, who's celebrating his birthday by talking about the program that's focused on the programs in our schools. Priscilla foreshadowed some of this.
The birthday gift they have.
You do.
Send it down right
You're too kind. All right.
I'm gonna give you 2. Send those down to him. Those are his birthday gifts.
Terrific. And his colleague Kelly is joining us also this evening too.
It's a facilitator in our organization.
Yeah. Thank you.
So my name is Jim Corwin. I am the co-director of the Rhode Island School Recycling Project, and we will soon be changing our name. Maybe we can get your opinion about that after my presentation. And
My name is Kelly D'Angelis. I'm facilitator for the Providence School Recycling Project.
so Kelly and I are going to give you a brief overview of our program in schools, and then I thought we'd take the opportunity to speak specifically about a couple of initiatives that we've identified that might really help reduce waste in Providence and particularly in schools. So I'll take the next slide. In 2019, actually, I've got the next slide, I'm sorry. In 2019, we received money from the Attorney General's office to quantify food waste in Rhode Island public schools. And so we did 15 food waste audits in 3 different districts: an urban, a rural, and a suburban district, elementary, middle, and high schools. And then we extrapolated the data. And who do you think wastes the most food? An elementary student, a middle school student, or high school student? High school. Actually, elementary. We measure it by enrollment, but it's 47 pounds per year. It's a little bit higher if you do it by serving. And middle school is close behind it, about 33, and high school is about 15 pounds per year. The thing that stood out, if I go back to that last slide, most to us was of the 2,500 tons that schools send to landfill each year, 388 tons of that was perfectly good food. It was untouched: yogurt, milk, banana, whole fruit, cheese, I mean, all considered really high value food by any food entry, and that's the equivalent of about 600,000 units. So that was an eye opener for us. So if we go back to the previous slide, sorry to do this. So we come to understand, and you probably mostly know this, I was amazed that Americans and most of the developed world waste so much food. Approximately a third of the food that gets produced gets wasted, meaning it goes, it does not get eaten. It's terrible for the environment, of course, because of the methane that is produced when we send it to the landfills. But when you consider all of the resources that go into producing the food that we waste, that is the biggest burden on the environment with regard to blue water and transportation and fossil fuels and everything it takes to process food. And then, of course, when you look at all that food that was perfectly good that got wasted, we still have not really recovered from the pandemic with regard to food waste. I'm sorry, with regard to food insecurity. Full 30% of Rhode Island families are food insecure, and 41% have children. Next slide, please, or 2 slides up. Very lucky that as I was doing the original food waste audits, Carson Newport was working on the food waste ban, and so we were able to adjust some of the criteria so that now, if you're an educational entity, you're defined as a school district. And every school district in Rhode Island, except for 2, produce more than 30 tons of food waste annually. So that really makes everyone fall into the criteria. And of course, with that new anaerobic digester, almost everybody except for 2 school districts are located within 15 miles of the recycling facility. This bill was also accompanied by a food donation, which asks us to take that perfectly good food and please get it to 100 students or to the local food bank. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is so our food waste production program is called Get Food Smart Rhode Island. The first thing we did was research best practices across the country and create a toolkit, which is available for free downloads from our website. It really has a lot of practical solutions and best practices and case studies, of which we follow. It's been downloaded, I think, 102 times, and I don't know one school that's done anything with it because, full disclosure, my wife is a 5th grade teacher, and I understand that teachers just don't have time to implement these things in school. And so we got money from the Department of Environmental Management, from the EPA and the EPA, to do a pilot program initially in 4 schools. And this is how our program looks now. We're 15 schools at this point, but this is how our program looks. First of all, we go in and we work with the administration and we say, we need 110 support or 150% support from you. They say, okay, they take us in and introduce us to all the key stakeholders, the custodians, the food service workers, the paraprofessionals in the cafeteria. You've got to involve them all, because if you don't, then you're just dropping something in their plate. You don't get them to tell you where you think the sorting station should be and where everything should be located. Long story short, that's a very important part. We then bring resource recovery in to present to the entire school about the problems of food waste, so they can understand why we're doing this. And then we train students to become cafeteria rangers. They get job descriptions, they get gloves, they get tongs, and of course, our biggest success is elementary schools because they can't wait to volunteer. They lobby the principal. When can I be a cafeteria ranger? And in year 1, we teach them how to convert food scraps away from the landfill to be composted and to recover perfectly good food. We bring refrigerators in every school, and so it can be redistributed to hungry students. And in year 2, we focus on strategies to reduce food waste. And next slide, I'm going to hand it over to Kelly, who can talk a little bit about what it looks like in this.
Yeah, so our goal is to really get everyone involved, as Jim mentioned. I used to work for a food service management company that serviced Providence schools, and that's how I originally became involved. And I've seen firsthand how much food is wasted by the students and also by the food service in schools. So getting everyone talking about the benefits of reducing that waste, and then setting up our sorting stations, as you can see here, basically an assembly line that students go through to put aside their shared table food, dump their liquid, usually milk, and put it right in the recycling bin, then landfill, so anything plastic, composting, and then finally they stack their trays to take up less space in the trash.
And we have a refrigerator in every school, so that we take it from the shared table cooler right to the refrigerator, and we we have a process for making sure veterans stores the refrigerators.
Next slide, please. And now I'm also a parent. I have a child in Smithfield schools, and so, you know, this is of course really dear to my heart. So, our program is running in Smithfield now in 2 out of 3 elementary schools. And as Jim mentioned, we train students to become the Rangers and really take responsibility and become invested in the program to keep it running even after we leave as facilitators. We like to have help from parent volunteers and school community volunteers, of course. Next slide. And the support from the administrators is especially powerful. Having that person who's running the lunchroom, having that person in charge of the school, motivating students and teachers to be involved is super helpful.
This is Maria Petrocelli from Martin Luther King. We walked in and presented the program, she says, "Where have you been?" The school it is on the top, getting administrators guilt.
Yeah, they know, schools know that it's a problem, and teachers and students know that everything's going in the trash, and they don't like it, but it just seems too big of an issue for them to deal with, and that's where we come in. We have our program that's all set up and makes it very easy for them to participate. Go to the next slide. And here you'll see the result of composting in school. So it sounds like a very messy business, but actually it becomes really simple and sanitary for custodians to take out that compost bin as it gets full. We have bags that keep it clean and contained, and that's picked up once a week or as needed to get rid of that rodent problem.
And as Leo just mentioned, when you throw milk and liquids and food into a dumpster, it's a smelly mess. Right now, the only thing going into the landfill bin is straws, plastic bags, chip bags, and wrappers. And it's all light, unsmelly stuff.
And so you can see here that overall waste from the lunchroom was reduced by almost 90% in our schools. So from 100 tons to 12.9 tons. It makes a humongous difference. The students see it, the teachers see it, and the custodians see it and appreciate it. We have some resistance at first, but they really come on board when they see how smooth of a process it becomes, rather than hauling 12 smelly bags out of the cafeteria. They're only taking 1 bag of trash.
And we have been successful already in one of our schools in reducing the landfill hauling frequency of picking up the dumpster. So we're already saving money as a result of putting less in the dumpsters. And so that 87% is really the reduction in the lunchroom waste that goes to the landfill. We also did an analysis of the total waste stream in one of our schools, and it came to 69%, so it's still very significant. There will be savings in landfill hauling as a result of this program.
Yeah,
Or any organic program.
we can also put compost bins in classrooms, and that helps as well. And I think the importance is really renegotiating those schools and districts renegotiating the contracts to take advantage of those. So we take students on trips to the landfill, which can be really powerful. I don't know if you've all been there, but it's amazing. This is Mara who works with us. And she does an amazing job showing students where their trash goes and where their recycling goes, because we know stuff doesn't get thrown away. It goes to dumpster, and that's filling up, or it's filling up. And go to the next slide, you can see we also do specific trainings for custodians, teachers, PTO, anyone that wants to be aware of how this program is running, so they know how to properly recycle.
And one of the things that I just want to point out here is, I was amazed that there's no trained custodians. Custodians are completely overlooked, and they are in the front line of managing solid waste. They're in the front line of fighting these environmental problems that waste is causing. And so we have proposed with the DEM a certified custodial, a certification for custodians in sustainability, which is a workshop that will take place at Resource Recovery 3 times a year. And so we would love to suggest that if anybody has access to the RFPs, when it's time to hire a custodian company, that you require a certified environmental custodian in each of our schools. So in Providence, we are in 9 schools, and those are the schools Nathan Bishop, MLK, Martin, as you can see. And that is right there, Fogarty. That's one of our biggest schools, and produces most of the waste already. Although they've made great strides in reducing waste. The next slide. So in those schools, in those 9 schools, to date, we have diverted 68.3 tons of organics, which is the weight of the space shuttle. And we show the students on a regular basis. We do food waste audits in all of our schools every other month. And the students come in and measure the waste, and we talk about what that means. Next slide. In those same schools in Providence, we have recovered 9.5 tons of perfectly good food. That's the equivalent of more than 15,000 meals. And initially, we worked with the administration about how they want to redistribute that food. At Nathan Bishop, there's a computer teacher who brings in a bowl from home. She fills it up with fruit and yogurt and a variety of things, takes it to her class. She's convinced that the focus of the class improves dramatically. So we have, when teachers jump in and kind of catalyze our program in their classroom, that's when we get the most success. Next slide, please. And food waste audits, I just told you, what we do is we measure it, and if all of our schools have a goal to reduce food waste by 50% by 2030, which is the EPA and the USDA goal. Next slide. And here's the chart that Leo just showed. So after we say to our students, you guys are doing a great job, you've diverted, a entire T-Rex size amount of waste away from the landfill, and you cover all the food, but here's the problem, we're still wasting food. And so we have to reduce the amount of food we waste, and then we talk about all the resources that go into producing that food. In the next slide, we come in and do strategies to reduce. So we do zero waste days, and we say to the students, we go to the fourth grade and say, your job is to promote it to the rest of the elementary school. And on this date, in 5 weeks, we're going to do a zero waste day. They have to meet with the food service provider to decide what meal should be served. And then they have to promote it to the school, and we give away stickers and prizes for those who waste no food on zero waste day. It's been very successful. Next slide will show you that in those schools in Providence, the average, in an urban school, the average is 63.7 pounds a year. In an urban elementary, which is a little bit higher than the rural and suburban. We are already in 3 of our schools that started 2 years ago, down 30%. Our goal is to get to 10% by 2030. I think we can do it. And then we say, okay, let's talk about carbon and let's talk about the environmental impact. And we point out that by diverting that much food away from the landfill and reducing methane, and by reducing the amount of food you waste by 30%, you are essentially reducing your carbon footprint by 75 metric tons. And we show them what the equivalencies are. The equivalencies are 18 gasoline-powered cars driving for a year, or the carbon sequestered by 88 acres of forest.
Yeah, so I don't know about you, but I often feel what they call climate anxiety because we know that we're in a climate crisis globally. But what can we do about it? Sometimes it can feel small to be just one person in this sea of issue. But surveys of students across the globe found that 55% of kids are extremely worried about the climate crisis. And so that is impacting their mental health, and we all know how important that is. So getting involved in environmental activism, actually being able to do something positive to protect our environment is beneficial and help. So our students who participate in our Get Food Smart program become leaders, and they're active in environmental stewardship. If we go to the next slide, they're recognized and rewarded for all of their hard work. We do great award ceremonies. We love to have the city councilors come and be part of that, to show students in schools what positive change they're enacting. You can see our famous quote from Ben Franklin here: involve the students and they will learn. Involving our students to become part of the solution to the crisis that we're all facing. By teaching our new generation, that's how we affect change in the future.
Yeah, so the goal of the organization is to make sure everything we do in school is project-based and it's involves the students. They're our primary customer. And the two things I just wanted to mention is I did mention about custodians, and I think if anybody has any sway, it would be great if we could have RFPs include the criteria that the custodians need to be certified, because sustainable waste management is the most important thing we've been doing this project. And the other thing I was going to mention is haulers. As we do contracts with haulers, we're working with Brian and May and some of the head of facilities at Providence schools a wonderful guy, a big supporter of our program. He's starting to break up some of the contracts with the big haulers, the consolidated haulers like Liga and Republic, because as they consolidate, they become less responsive. You know, you can't get them if they miss a pickup. You can't even get on the phone for 24 or 48 hours. And so he is beginning to break it up to smaller and smaller haulers. And I also think any contract should have a proviso in it that you can reset the contract if suddenly you're putting 69% less volume and less weight in your dumpster. Either you don't need to pick up twice a week, once a week, or you can get a smaller dumpster. And I believe these savings will offset the cost of hauling the organics. So this would be a cost neutral project for the students. That's right.
And who funds your operation?
You know, the Department of Environmental, the EPA in Rhode Island has been very supportive, and they helped us write our first EPA Healthy Communities grant, and the EPA gave us the second one, and now we're getting money for, and then Kevin Proft, I'm sorry, and Priscilla, who are just huge champions of our program. They have the good foresight to get us involved in the USDA program for Providence. So now we're in 9 Providence schools, and we are about to do the entire district of North Providence next year. We got a USDA grant for that. And now the Rhode Island Foundation has found out about the program and still has 11th Hour Racing, which is Eric Schmidt money, it's Google money. And so I shouldn't probably say that. But in any event, they want us to do every school in the state. And so now we're trying to scale up, and that's why we're building the facilitation team, and that would be interesting.
And I'll just add one more thing, a little bit of color from my perspective. As I said, I worked for a food service management company in Providence, and it was pressure from the city of sustainability, you know, organizations like Groundwork and Rhode Island School Recycling Projects that pushed us to be in compliance with the food waste law and to do back at the house composting in all of Providence schools. So that was one of the things I did in 2022 before I left. And so I think that continued pressure and keeping an eye on the school, making sure that that's part of the RFP process, that all the schools should be composting. And as Providence, we are a leader for the whole state, and I think we can be a leader for the country as well.
And the last thing I want to say is I began this project back in 2000, and it was when the state made recycling, mixed recycling, a mandate for schools. And in response to a Providence Journal article called Recycling is Hard Lessons, where they profiled the Providence school, where the students were beautifully separating everything in the classrooms, only had to commingle at the end of the day. We exposed that, and we created a process. And through our process, when we started, fewer than 20% of schools were recycling properly. And within 7 years, we've had 68% of schools recycling properly. And so there is a certain amount of peer pressure in the school environment, where if one school starts doing it, if your school's not doing it, the parents will hear about it and they'll put pressure on the administration. So we do have that magic working for us. And, you know, the phone rings every day.
Great, commissioners, questions? Any questions? I jumped right in there, I'm sorry. That was a great presentation. One question, how did those schools get selected? Brought in the
We
Providence,
go where we want it.
Oh, how did the schools get selected?
Yeah.
the Providence schools, how did they get selected? Thank you.
Well, we networked, and you know, there are a lot of great organizations. The Rhode Island Public Schools Coalition got us in front of a lot of the schools that they thought would be the right kind of school. And so we actually turned down a number of schools where we did not have the kind of support at the administration level we needed. And so we went into those schools and pitched the STEAM teachers and the folks who are passionate about the environment, and they took us into the principal's office and they said, let's go for it. And Brian May, who's the director of facilities, when we first saw our program, we were already in 5 schools. He said, how did you guys get it? Because unfortunately, if you go to the top, chances are you're probably going to have a difficult time getting your program in school. So we were kind of put in the bottom and snuck in the back door, and we got it going.
Is there a baseline cost to go into a school?
In the pilot, we were working with a number of about $6,500 a school just for all the materials and the hauling and our pilot. And so we're bringing that down. I think it will probably be in our next grant more like 4 or 3,500. And we're building our facilitator model on a train-the-trainer kind of basis. You know, there's a little bit of extra cost goes into that now, just because it's, this money can get into experiment with processes.
And how much funding do you get out of the grants from, that Providence is getting, the USDA grants
Yes,
that you referenced?
The first round of our funding Providence is for 4 schools, and I believe that was somewhere in the neighborhood of,
Approximately is fine, I just want to get a sense.
anything else. I'd say it's like $50,000 or $60,000.
It's for 4 schools for the year, right, or year.
It's for 2 years. I'm sorry, it was more schools for 2 years.
The conference call, including.
I'll do 2 years.
I just wanted to get an idea. Okay, that sounds great. This is a long meeting. I apologize. Councilman, Vargas, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much. So, as you cover the waste from the food, who gets the food on the sidewalk, who comes and pick it up?
After we recover perfectly good food,
Yeah.
or after we collect the food scraps? Food scraps get composted by either bootstrap or blackwood compost. They take them to composting facilities, and then they bring back compost in the spring to the garden, so we can demonstrate circularity.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for our previous presenter?
Yeah.
No?
Right, presentation.
Are we sure? Once, twice, gone? I want to say thank you very much for taking the time, enlightening us on all of the presentations tonight were wonderful. I've learned an awful lot, and I thank you for coordinating that. We have heard you loud and clear, and you've given us, I think, some good ideas to get our shop in order, so to speak. Okay, with that, I don't have anything else on the agenda. I do want to say, for the clerk's request, we will not be meeting. The council is in recess in August, as everyone is aware. And so we are going to take the rest of August off. Even though our challenge is to try to finish up in October. So
You need to have an RFP out in October, so. we need to
Finish
get
up sooner than-
anyway,
yeah.
Recommendation in September.
so anyway, we're going to try to move as quickly as we can. We'll be back at the table first Wednesday in September. All right, so if anybody has any questions, thoughts, concerns, don't hesitate to reach out. And we will work to put together our next presentations and hopefully start to put some form and substance to our discussion so that we can have a broad discussion at the table. All right, next few meetings. Okay, with that, motion to adjourn made by Vice Chair Espinel.
So moved.
Seconded by Burnett and Tony. Anyone else? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?